Coming up with This Week in Computer Hardware, the Sprint T-Mobile merger gets judges' approval, Samsung's new S20s, and the Galaxy Z Flip. Coronavirus killed Mobile World Congress, ARM's latest Edge IA processors, and so much more. All coming up next on Twitch. This Week in Computer Hardware is brought to you from LastPass Studios. Using the same password everywhere is a security nightmare. It's just waiting to happen. LastPass easily creates unique passwords for every site. Visit lastpass.com/twit.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware, episode 553, recorded on February 13th, 2020. MWC, Mobile World canceled. This episode of This Week in Computer Hardware is brought to you by Zapier. Zapier connects all your business software and handles the work for you so you can focus on what matters most. Right now, through the end of the month, go to zapier.com/twitch to get your free 14-day trial. Welcome to Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware, Twitch weekly show that aims to bring you all the hardware news. And this week we have a lot of mobile news, from the shocking to the delightful to the just plain sad. Joining me as always, Sebastian Peak, PC Per Editor-in-Chief, man about Ann Arbor, Michigan. How are you, sir?
I'm good. I'm puzzling over the Ann Arbor thing, but you know what? You got it right between the two coasts of this island we call Michigan, which I believe is an island last time I checked. It's actually a peninsula.
Fortunately, you benchmark better than you geography. Your benchmarking is better than your
not
geography.
my strong suit, Patrick, but I know where I am, I think. Southwest Michigan, somewhere in there.
Oh, my goodness. We hope. It's something I wasn't prepared for this week, but happened whether I liked it or not, is the decision on the T-Mobile Sprint merger. That court case has been floating around in the background for approximately forever, it seems like. Vox, or Recode, I think they did a fine job of summing it up. The T-Mobile plus Sprint deal is good for you if you like paying more for your wireless plan. In no small part because the judge in the case, a Clinton appointee, has decided that, I guess, Dish is going to create a new fourth wireless network, and that will restore a fourth competitor to what will now be the three mobile phone providers in the United States, thus restoring some level of competition. There's been a lot of interesting writing about this all over the place. One of the most fascinating reads was in the New York Post, which was discussing the role of Mayoshi-san and SoftBank and his imperial nature and how that managed to, A, really screw up his relationship with the FCC in the early days, and B, the decision to not do a good job reaching out into communities, because they were building towers and they decided they were going to put boxes on top of municipal buildings, which worked great in Japan. But Miyoshi-san doesn't have the sway in the United States he does in Japan, and essentially how they were being outspent by a factor of 5 or 6 or 7, probably somewhere between 3. They were underspending compared to the other networks, somewhere in the neighborhood of $5 to $6 billion a year, or $3 to $6 billion a year, depending on whose estimates you're looking at. But it's been interesting to watch all this come up because the judge essentially decided that the decision was his to make, and that he was going to make it, and he's made it. There's this incredibly snarky article in The Verge. Quote, "The court let T-Mobile buy Sprint because Sprint completely sucks." That's Nilay Patel, who's kind of the commander-in-chief over at The Verge, who also happens to be a lawyer. Well, he put it this way. Judge Victor Marrero of the United States District Court for the Southern District of New York basically decided that the various data and experts put forward by the 10 state attorneys general who sued to stop the merger weren't worth taking seriously, and that he would decide for himself whether T-Mobile and Dish seemed like cool companies worth trusting. And he basically decided that T-Mobile CEO is super cool and trustworthy. In the word of Nilay Patel. Snark aside, Nilay did a really good breakdown and translation of the judge's decision. It is a great read. It is probably an infuriating read for a lot of our listeners, simply because it's just, it's.
Well, you're losing competition. Although obviously there's still AT&T, there's still Verizon. I don't immediately see this as, I guess I'm jaded because I've had T-Mobile as a primary carrier for probably about 5 years now. And one of the appeals of T-Mobile, if you happen to live in an area where you get good coverage, is that they're very inexpensive compared to, say, Verizon, for example. So a lot of people around where I am use Verizon. And if you're on T-Mobile and you happen to have good coverage, you can save a lot of money because you get one of their T-Mobile One plans, which I think are $50 a month is what my wife and I pay. And it's unlimited everything. And I get, like, I went to Cambridge a couple years ago and I got off the plane. And it's like, welcome to England. And it was free data, although it was very slow. It was like 256 kilobit. But there's some perks and it's not expensive. So if all that kind of stuff starts to go away, if my rate jumps from 50 to 60 and then 70 and that sort of thing, then I'll be upset. But obviously, there are ramifications to this that I'm not privy to.
Yeah, I don't know. It's messy, like most really, really large mergers. And it's interesting because part of like I mentioned earlier, part of the reporting on this is pointing out that how Sprint has considerably, compared to the rest of the networks, has underinvested in its network, has not done a particularly great job of rolling out additional coverage. I mean, unrelated to this case, you heard me complaining about the sort of marketing tomfoolery employed in Sprint's coverage map, where what's supposed to be a 4G coverage zone is actually their extended 4G, which may actually be 3G and can actually be throttled 3G. It's kind of fascinating to sort of read this decision. It's a massive decision. Well, maybe not that massive, but it's 173 pages to dig through if you're feeling like it. And at one point, Nilay sums up, all right, so Judge Marrero is just winging it. Let's see if he falls for some nonsense about 5G. And the judge wrote in the decision, although the full impact of 5G remains to be seen, it promises significant increases in the speeds available to consumers, lower consumption of mobile devices' batteries, and reduced latency or time required for a mobile device and mobile network to communicate with each other. 5G will likely enable consumers to use augmented reality or virtual reality applications and to stream video at a significantly higher picture quality, referred to as 4K.
Oh, no. Everything you just said makes me question this person's actual knowledge of technology, which, you don't expect that, but
there's also things like the judge doesn't actually realize that unlimited plans are offered, for example, by AT&T. Part of what's hysterical is the following, or one of the following paragraphs to that 5G paragraph is, and this is the judge's words, quote, because this process takes time, prominent experts in the wireless industry have expressed concerns that other countries like China or South Korea may fully implement 5G first and dominate the market for innovative applications made possible through 5G, which is followed by Nilay's comment, quote, we regret to inform you that Nilay Patel has died of embarrassment caused by race to 5G rhetoric. The rest of this piece will be directed by his ghost. The judge doesn't entirely understand that both Verizon and AT offer unlimited data plans by the current standards of the definition of data in the mobile industry, or that there are bundled deals. It's messy. It is a messy and kind of weird decision. I tend to side with what CNET and several other places wrote, where they basically said, this is great if you want to pay more money. I think it's going to reduce competition. I think it's probably good for Sprint customers if the rollout works the way it's supposed to. T-Mobile, of course, having their 6 gigahertz system, or their 600 megahertz system rolled out nationwide. I don't know. I wait with bated breath to see what the turnout on this is. The other kind of crazy thing that happened this week in the mobile world is that concerns over corona virus shuttered Mobile World Congress 2020. So if you're not familiar with MWC, Mobile World Congress is essentially the CES of the mobile phone industry, the mobile industry. A lot of the bigger announcements take place there. Earlier this month, LG dropped, then ZTE, Ericsson apparently being one of the biggest vendors, or in the sense that they have a big giant display at Mobile World Congress, and then Nvidia, Intel, Vivo, Sony, Amazon, NTT Docomo, and finally this week, like Nokia, BT, and HMD all dropped out. This is all for a show that was supposed to take place in about 10 days from now. As CNET notes, with Mobile World Congress 2020 canceled, most new Android phones face a tough debut. This is kind of wild because, both of us, certainly have attended CES and other large trade shows. And there's always kind of a wonder what will happen if something goes wrong around the time of a trade show and shutters it. But in this case, one of the biggest events in tech, annual event in tech, has just been completely shuttered because everybody was terrified of what was going to happen in terms of spreading coronavirus.
It's Samsung, huge. If people aren't aware of it, MWC is not, I don't know if it's as big as CES as far as the number of attendees and the number of vendors and that sort of thing, but it's global, it's huge, and everybody who covers this industry, who also covers mobile phones, which has become everybody, attends it every year if they can. And it's
somewhere in the neighborhood of 100,000 people attend Mobile World Congress. As
a
of
lot
last
of airline travel.
Yeah.
And so I can see the fears there. If you're afraid of being in an airplane right now, or if you're worried about being around people from all over the world, because there's this huge contingents from all over the globe there in Barcelona, where they all meet.
It's also crazy because they were also talking about, Chinese attendees can come if they've gone through like a 2-week quarantine. It's somewhere outside of China. They were going to do body temperature checks of attendees to see if they were feverish. It's
what a nightmare. They had to shutter it.
I don't think they had any choice. Samsung did their big unveiled event this week in San Francisco. If you've been pining for a flip phone, do yourself a favor. Keep an eye on Chris Velasco over at Engadget. He got a hand like a half an hour, like the classic, like you're an important tech journalist, you can play with this phone for 20 minutes in the back room kind of deal, or maybe more sophisticated than that. But he's been working on a Razer review and got some hands-on time with the Galaxy Z Flip. And the head of the article, the title pretty much sums it up. Samsung Galaxy Z Flip hands-on, Razer who? And he notes that the Z Flip is essentially delivering last year's flagship phone performance. And, quote, that's something you just can't say about the Razer. The real star, I think he's really big about the screen, right? Because this is Samsung's second flip phone, the first one being a failure we have probably beat to death, or that particular horse, dead, has been beaten, too much.
It did it to itself.
Actually, it did do it to itself. But he was really impressed. There's a 6.7-inch flexible Super AMOLED screen, which is covered in, quote, fully flexible glass, meaning it should be dramatically more durable than the soft plastic screens used in devices like the original Galaxy Fold, the Huawei Mate 10, and yes, the Razer. So he was pretty impressed by that. He's also working on his Razer review. And there's a pretty good write-up he did on Engadget about the Galaxy S20 phones that were debuted this week. Of note is the 120 hertz refresh rate on these, which gives it that buttery smooth feeling we all desire, but only in 1080p mode, not at full native resolution. The curved edges are gone, which Mr. Velasco pines for a little bit. Performance is what you'd expect from a flagship Snapdragon 865 or Samsung Exynos, depending on where you are buying the phone. They're putting a minimum of 12 gigs of RAM and 128 gigabytes of storage in these. If you're wondering why RAM prices are going up, it's not just server farms. 4,045 milliamp hour batteries. And the prices are healthy. The S20 starts at $900, not $9,000, $999. Tops out at $1,399 for the S20 Ultra. All of them support 5G, but the basic S20 doesn't support millimeter wave networks, which, unless you live in a major urban metropolis right now, is probably not going to impact your life all that much. So, yeah, they're pretty. They're not cheap. The other thing I noticed this week is I almost bought a Moto G7 because I need a new Android phone to do some testing. My long-suffering Moto G6, of course, having been dropped in a toilet and died either from the toilet or the fact that I probably doused it in too much 90% isopropyl alcohol immediately afterward. But so Motorola announced the Moto G and the Moto Power G, and now Best Buy and a whole bunch of other vendors are selling the Moto G7 unlocked in 64 gigabyte storage / 4 gigabytes of memory versions for $150, which is essentially half the original $299 price. So if you're looking for a great deal on an inexpensive Android phone, that might be one worth looking at if you're not up for waiting for the Moto G or Moto G Power. Protocol reports that TCL is going to be entering the phone market in the United States the second quarter of this year. TCL, of course, having done a fantastic job of making inexpensive TVs and putting a hurt on pretty much every other television company. They've done a great job with integrating the Roku TV software. They've done an excellent job in producing inexpensive, high-quality screens, and they've decided they are going after the mobile phone market. They plan to produce flagship phones for $500 or less. I am very, very excited to see what they do. Other news and phones this week. Yeah.
Side note. Since you're talking about TCL, is there a relationship between TCL and Hisense? Because the last time I was in a Walmart, they had a big 75-inch Hisense Roku TV, and I was looking at it like, wait a minute, I thought TCL made the Roku TVs, and apparently they both do? Or maybe it's the same
TVs
company?
Are made by several...
okay.
Let me see if I can find the complete list of Roku TV vendors. Hold that
I thought it was a company licensing Roku. I didn't realize Roku was working with partners. That's interesting.
Roku, yeah. So Roku TV can be found in TCL, right, which we talk about a lot because they're doing such a fantastic job. There a couple of years ago they came out with a 55-inch, $600 55-inch television that kind of blew everybody away. But they are not the only one using Roku TV. Roku TV can be found in TCL, Sharp, Hisense, Philips, Sanyo, Element, JVC, RCA, Hitachi, Magnavox, Westinghouse, and On. On, if memory serves, is the house electronics brand for Walmart. I believe Element is the house electronics brand for Best Buy. Or I may be confused about that one. Whether or not all of these companies are currently producing televisions is an entirely different. Yeah. No, actually...
I think Insignia is Best Buy's brand.
Element. Yeah, Element is showing up in Walmart. Insignia is the Best Buy brand I was thinking of. Insignia, Element. Yeah, On and Element are showing up in Walmart. On is a Walmart exclusive. They made that $100 Android tablet we talked about last year. Gee whiz. Essential, which we briefly covered back and forth as we waited for the Andy Rubin venture capital backed cell phone startup is done. Essential Products is shut down.
Does this surprise you at all, Patrick?
I would have liked it for it to have succeeded. I mean, they raised like $330 million in venture capital. Not that that's any guarantee of success, but it would have been nice to, I think the phone, it would have been nice if the phone was more impressive than I think it was when it shipped finally. The upside of that phone is it's gotten monthly updates since it came out in 2017. But essentially the last update on the Essential, February 3rd, 2020, that's going to be its last update. It's frustrating, right? Because they had an interesting design. They built a phone. The camera was a mess when it shipped. They did a bunch of software updates to help with the camera. Android Authority pointed out that this was the first commercial smartphone with a notched display.
True.
Which of course
they were pioneers of the notch.
Pioneers of the incredibly irritating notch. They had a interesting prototype that Andy Rubin was displaying, this sort of long, skinny phone called the Gem that had a lot of potential. But gone. $330 million, gone. Which is kind of the way a lot of these, imagine how Magic Leap investors are feeling. Although, we hear that Magic Leap hasn't introduced their real product yet. Have you been reading up about the Cortex M55 CPU and the Ethos U55 AI accelerator, the new Edge AI parts from ARM?
No, I have not. This reminds me of, because of course this is obviously using ARM cores, but there was a processor from like that third x86 maker we talked about a few months ago that was the first to integrate AI acceleration on chip. But this is interesting too. And of course, low power, because we're talking about Cortex M55 cores. Let's see, the Ethos U55 is their accelerator. I see. So yeah, no, I've not read much about this, but it's interesting because this is obviously a much lower energy variant of that same idea to have onboard dedicated AI processing in addition to traditional CPU cores.
Yeah. I mean, the idea is that it will be able to do AI stuff without a connection to the interwebs, which is kind of a big deal. What also is crazy about this is, they're talking about this kind of AI stuff showing up in light bulbs, refrigerators, speakers. I'm still not entirely sure why you need AI in light bulbs, but
Patrick, you gotta open your mind here. I mean, obviously, when you think light bulbs, you're just thinking about luminescence, right? But it's so much more than that. It could be a smart speaker. It could be the thing that turns your dryer on to freshen up your clothing, like steam them in the morning, or answers questions like, light bulb, what is the name of the CPU that was the x86 with an AI coprocessor? And the answer is the Centaur from VIA, which I just got from semiaccurate.com.
Oh my goodness. I still, if you're looking for AI performance, neural network mathematics, the Cortex, the U55's got to be kind of fascinating because they're talking about 480 times the performance compared to Cortex M or previous Cortex M generations working on their own. So I don't know.
Even though AI sounds like it's very specific to certain types of commercial endeavors, but think about the fact that there's quite a bit of AI built into modern smartphones where some of the technology for things like background blurring, when you only have one lens, or any of the post-processing effects with photography can actually be enhanced and sped up significantly with onboard AI coprocessors, in addition to the image signal processor, which is usually a separate component of the chipset of your phone. So it's interesting to see advances there, even if right now it's on a larger scale, like maybe the ARM server side. Maybe it'll trickle down to the phone side. We'll have even more incredible phone effects, like removing people from pictures and crazy stuff like that. Not that I'd want to. Not that I want to take anyone out of any of my photos.
I did find a Mike Elgin article on Computer World from several years ago that quote, the brightest idea ever, AI light bulbs.
I get it because of it's a light and
I don't know. The farther I dig into the article, the less sense I see. But that could be my lack of sophistication in the matter.
Hey, just know that, right? Sorry, I'm talking over you again. I'm sorry. Listeners, there's a slight lag between us, and I start to talk. I hear Patrick talking, and then I power through because I'm rude. I'm sorry. I was going to say, I'm still thinking about those Moto G7 prices. That is... how tempting it is when you use like $1,000 phone, which you drop and then the corner of the screen breaks. And then you think, I could buy an unlocked phone for less than $200. It's the phone itself is cheaper than the screen repair. No, but who cares?
True.
It'll be a camera. It'll be better than if I went back to one of my ancient Android phones that I never get rid of. So like I could go back to my Nexus 4, which had probably the worst camera I've ever used, other than maybe my Lumia 520. Those were really bad. That was in the old days, the Wild West of like 2012. And look at where we are now.
You know what? The Best Buy in Ann Arbor is open until 9 o'clock tonight.
Ann Arbor is a solid 2-hour drive from me. But
why did I think you were in Ann Arbor? I apologize.
I don't know. I am actually.
If you could leave by 6:30, you could be in Ann Arbor.
There's this place. There's this place in Michigan, Southwest Michigan. It's exactly between Detroit and Chicago. It's called Kalamazoo, and Kalamazoo, Michigan, is actually the birthplace of both Checker Cab and Gibson guitar.
Wow.
So,
and another.
In fact, if I go about 2 or 3 miles down the hill from me, you can see the old Gibson guitar plant. Years ago they left and went to Nashville, but we still have the old Gibson guitar plant right here in Kazoo. Yeah, how far is it? I see we're doing the Google Maps here. How far is it to Ann Arbor from Kalamazoo?
Well, don't you have a Best Buy in Portage, Michigan?
We do.
Right next to Kalamazoo. That might be a better choice for you.
It's an hour and a half.
It's an hour and a half. Okay. Well, apparently I drive like a grandfather, which I admit to. So yeah, I take that other route on the Google Maps where it's like take the most direct route or take the one that takes like an extra hour. Like, oh, that one sounds good. Avoid highways.
Wow.
Drive 55.
Just south of Kalamazoo is a Best Buy in Portage, or Portage, I guess it would be. In any case,
the whole Portage Kalamazoo thing could be a podcast in and of itself, Patrick, because it's really Kalamazoo. But they decided that they should be called something differently because that's where all the money was. So at some point in like the 1950s, they called themselves Portage or something. I don't know.
Good to know.
Just where
this episode of This Week. You're just never going to let me run this. This episode of This Week in Computer.
I'm done.
This episode of This Week in Computer Hardware is brought to you by Zapier. Zapier connects all your business software and handles the work for you so you can focus on what matters to you. Look, growing a business is hard. You don't want to be wasting time every day. Oh, yeah, I'm going to move my data. Oh, Jimmy emailed me that number, and I can put it in a spreadsheet, and I can go to the CRM. And wouldn't it be nice if stuff just happened, right? Automation. It's all computers and data. It's the 21st century, for goodness sake. So Zapier's got over 1,500 apps. It's probably the easiest way you're ever going to find automating your work, right? So you can focus on what you need to do, not focus on like, how do I get this data into my thing, right? Engage leads instantly, automatically import new customers, notify your team about opportunities. Zapier is customizable. They support multi-step zaps, so you can do just about anything. I mean, the possibilities are endless, right? And it's easy. You can build the tool you need in minutes. No more wasting your time on tasks you know could be automated, because that's exactly what Zapier was built to do. Just go to Zapier.com/Twitch, connect the apps you use most, and let Zapier take it from there. Best of all, it's easy to build the exact tool you need in minutes without writing code or going to the, can I get some time from a developer for this? No, you need to join more than 4.5 million people who are saving an average of 40 hours per month by using Zapier. It's really cool, and it's incredible the list of tools they have that you can bundle together. It's a time saver. Now, make more time to grow your business right now through the end of the month. Try Zapier free by going to Zapier.com/Twitch. That's Zapier.com/TWICH for your free 14-day trial. Zapier.com/Twitch. We want to thank them for their support of This Week in Computer Hardware. Goodness. If you run Dell's Support Assistant, or I should say Support Assist is the actual name of the product. If you don't have auto updates turned on, do yourself a favor and immediately Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. If you're running the business version, you need 2.1.4, Dell says. If you're running on a home PC, you're looking for 3.4.1. Essentially, there's a privilege escalation bug in Dell Support Assist, and you need to upgrade that now to patch the hole. So that's right up by the register. If you want to get super old school, you can read the CVE note. CVE 2020-5316 severity high. Severity rating CVS is base score 7.8. But essentially, Dell Support Assist for business PCs 2 through 2.1.3, and the Support Assist for home PCs 2 through 3.4 all need to be updated. If you have auto update, it should have already taken care of itself. But if you're doing manual updates, hi to Dell.com and get your update done. So, NVIDIA's GeForce losing all Activision's Blizzard game like a week after they launch GeForce Now. Do you care? Is streaming gaming done for you, Sebastian?
I personally don't think it's really ready yet. We've been negative, or at least I'll take ownership of being negative about several emerging technologies in the last year or so. And streaming is one of them. I think that even though it's been downplayed by people who seem to have a vested interest in the technologies and the products that use such technologies, that there is a latency issue. It's something that's talked about by actual gamers, not in press releases. And
right.
There's, the product. I was actually asking people about this a week or two ago, whenever this came down, that it came out of beta, because I had forgotten about it. Like, oh yeah, GeForce Now, I see that sometimes, but I never used it. I know years ago when it was first coming out, there was a lot of testing, a lot of talk about it and its usefulness. And then I'm like, hey, it's out of beta. Does anybody care? Asking everybody on the staff here, and they're just like, when was the last time you've ever used it? And one person on the entire staff came forward and was like, yeah, I tried it out for like a month. Because you get like a free month. I'm like, okay, did you ever use it again? No. So it just felt kind of irrelevant. And so if for them to come out and drop, it's weird to me that they drop out after it goes live. Like after it becomes a legitimate out of beta product, suddenly Activision Blizzard is dropping out. Like, oh, they must have forgotten that they were involved. Or maybe they didn't like the terms because, of course, now that it's out of beta and you're paying for it as a premium service, then maybe they wanted a bigger cut, or maybe they want to control their own streaming service. Because that seems to be the new trend. Everybody has their own streaming service, whether it's that's the way for video content, where I can't
That's
even
what it smells like.
Yeah, like Activision Blizzard Online, something like, resurrect the old battle.net or something and charge $5 a month for it. And they get all that money, and they have all their own exclusive titles that would attract people to that platform. So it doesn't surprise me. It just surprises me that they announced this shortly after GeForce Now comes out of beta, unless they somehow didn't know that NVIDIA was planning on doing that. Maybe NVIDIA is playing politics behind the scenes, trying to force their hand.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it's working if they're trying to force that. Yeah, it's curious. We'll keep an eye on it, see what happens. In our weekly, what feels like Huawei updates, at least it feels that way. The Wall Street Journal reports, and I'm just going to quote this article directly. U.S. officials say that Huawei technologies can covertly access mobile phone networks around the world through backdoors designed for use by law enforcement as Washington tries to persuade allies to exclude the Chinese company from their networks. I am fascinated and highly curious about this because this is, I can't decide if it's overwhelming or underwhelming given how long this has been drawing on. But as something like this has been running for something like the last decade, or had the ability to do this for like the last decade. It's, Huawei, of course, denies this, but I'd like to actually find a deeper analysis on this. But the U.S. basically says it can prove that Huawei has this secret backdoor access globally to mobile networks. I don't know. It's
you can always question why certain things. Like we just talked about that last story. Why announce this now?
Yeah.
Why does the U.S. now say in an election year that Huawei has all these backdoors?
Yeah.
There could be some sort of motivation there behind this decision, but is it surprising to anybody? And of course, if Huawei is acting on instructions from their government, they're going to be required to deny it. And just like anyone who's under orders would have to deny it.
Right.
I think it's only sort of recently become public knowledge that backdoors even exist in services. Like the last few years, we've become this newly cynical nation where we look at everything a little bit suspiciously. Something that I think more technologically savvy people for well over, since the inception of all these technologies have been skeptical about, how governments involve themselves and what becomes exposed and at what level. So trust no one is a philosophy that I think a lot of people have adopted for this reason. Like, we don't really know who has access to anything, so let's not just put ourselves out there. Because anybody could be listening at any time, even if it's just for quality assurance purposes.
Right. I don't know. We'll see. In a more cheerful update after all that long stream of slightly negative news this week, Phanteks Enthoo 719 full tower case review. It's so pretty in the pictures up on PC Per.
Look at that. That hardline liquid build was performed by case reviewer extraordinaire Kent Burgess here for PC Perspective. And he's also upped his photography game considerably. So I feel like he's arrived. This is it. The penultimate case review from Kent so far. And it's funny because this Enthoo, if you remember, Phanteks Enthoo, their previous version of, I think it was called the Lux. Because, of course, we could spin this negative, too, because they had a case called the Lux. And this was going to be the Lux 2. And they showcased it as the Lux 2. I think it was at CES a year ago. And then another company, Thermaltake, comes forward and says, you can't use that name. And so instead of it going to court or settlement, they just said, fine, we're just going to change the name. We're not going to go to court. They actually had a press release they sent out to different outlets stating that they were changing the name of our upcoming case. So it's kind of funny, but at the same time, good for them that they just said, forget it. We're not going to go to court over the name of a case. So this became the Enthoo 719, which is really the Lux 2. And the Lux was this giant case that could actually hold two systems at the same time. That was the gimmick. I think I'm the one who reviewed the original one like 5 years ago. And sure enough, you could put a SFX power supply in the back alongside an ATX power supply, I think is how it worked. And you could put a mini ITX motherboard on one side and a standard ATX motherboard on the other side. I don't know why you'd really ever want to do that, but if you did want to do that, this case actually does support it, though Kent did not do a dual system build. He did a conventional build, and then he used hardline liquid cooling just to see if it all fit. And that's kind of where he ran into some issues, and I've seen some feedback about this with people using certain radiator sizes and that sort of thing, using the floor versus the ceiling of the case for different rads. And it was kind of a mixed bag. It doesn't come with any fans or anything, so his testing of the case was kind of, he just relegated it to his own standardized in-house testing where he uses the same set of fans for every case. But in the end, it was kind of it was an above average performer as far as airflow is concerned, which is nice for a case that has a solid front panel. Because if you're looking at pictures of this, you'll see big vent openings all around, like the edges of the front panel. And there are screen filters on three sides, and it seems to take in quite a bit of air, which is nice. But he said, because of design choices that Phanteks made with this, quote, building in the 719 requires an attention to detail and component specs that go a little beyond any other case I've used previously. However, if you work within the limitations, the additional care is worth it, as you will be rewarded with an excellent system in the end, end quote. So a little tricky to build in, some complaints about, clearances and mounting certain things. But he in fairness, he did have quite a complex build. He used every inch of the case, pretty much. So not everybody will run into those issues, but it looks great. I mean, his build, of course, looks nice. I like the look of these cases. They're huge, too. This is a full tower. This is not a mid-tower case. And for a case this big, I know we were talking last year about how 200 seems to be the new 100 for case pricing. Something this huge, it's a full tower, 190, like it's 189.99. So it's not crazy expensive at all. So if you're in the market for that really high-end enclosure for your next build, plus he reviewed this, I think they call it anthracite gray. I really like these. Looking at the pictures here, this case looks really cool in that gray color, in my opinion. So you can check out the full review at PCPro.com. Look at Kent's photography and check out his liquid-cooled final product here, which is very nice.
It's pretty.
Yeah.
Well done. Got an email from Jay. He emailed Twitch at twit.tv. He says, I want to build a computer this year, but I don't necessarily need to build one right this moment or in the immediate future. At this point, should I wait for Zen 3 and for the upcoming next-gen GPU releases from Nvidia and AMD? Prices for Zen 2 and the current-gen Nvidia and AMD cards should drop once those releases occur, so if releases this year prove underwhelming, one could pick up the previous-gen products at a possibly hefty discount. What do you guys think? Thanks, Jay. So generally speaking, if you take a look at this camel, if you watch the video right now, you can see sort of a camel price monitoring for an AMD Ryzen 7 3700X, which is a nice processor. But, you know, the graph makes it look like there's huge price changes, but outside of some drops down to $300 around Black Friday, it's generally because of scarcity, I think, either been at or above its $330 price point, and now it's dropped down to about $310. And this isn't particularly dramatic, but generally speaking, over time with CPUs or GPUs, there is going to be this, you know, period where it's selling for a premium. If availability is high, i.e., it's not a classic sort of AMD release where they have several GPUs for sale in the first months of launch, and then you can never buy it. But generally speaking, over time, you will almost always get more power for less money the longer you wait, right? And you picked it out, Jay. You're either going to get the same CPU or GPU for less cash, or for the same amount of money, you'll get a more powerful CPU or GPU. We mentioned last week on the show, you know, we're expecting memory and SSD prices to go up this year. If you know, I don't think we're not going to see the kind of there is no reason to expect that we're going to get the crazy numbers we saw back at sort of cheap, peak coin mining madness, where GPUs were selling for far in excess of their MSRP and memory prices spiked and everything else. But you can generally expect through the course of this year that memory prices and SSD prices are going to go up. But so if you've been thinking about upgrading memory or an SSD, you might want to do that sooner rather than later. As far as CPUs and GPUs, you know, the longer you can wait, the more power you're going to get, barring another anomaly like the Bitcoin mining insanity, which NVIDIA, I think, still maintains was not Bitcoin mining, but an incredible surge in gaming upgrade enthusiasm.
Of course.
Yeah.
I think that people, you know, there's different schools of thought about when you upgrade and when to actually buy components in their lifetime. And exactly what you're saying, stuff tends to get cheaper over time. We do kind of see it plateau, like with Intel especially. It seems like Intel parts, they maintain their retails even after they've become obsoleted. There's still Skylake stuff you can buy new that's MSRP, which seems outrageous. Then completely discounting the used market, forget about secondary market, Craigslist, eBay, and stuff. If you're just buying new, my own philosophy, if this counts for anything, is if you're not going to get the latest and greatest, if you think it's around the corner but you don't want to wait, I have a very hard time with that if I'm going to spend premium dollars. Like if I thought, okay, next month we're going to see the announcement of the new RTX 3000 series, then I would not want to go out and buy an RTX 2080 Super right now. I would save my money. But if I got an amazing deal on like a RX 5700 or something, then I would do that. Because even if the next great product comes out and I want it, at least I didn't overpay. If I got a great deal on something and don't really lose much money if I decide to just turn around and sell it off again. There are products like, we've talked about this a couple times in the last month or so, AMD's sort of quiet refresh of their original Ryzen parts, that Ryzen 1600 AF variant. If you can find one of those for about $85, that's an amazingly good deal on a 6-core 12-thread processor that will hold you over until the new Ryzen 3 stuff, or the Zen 3 stuff comes out. We'll see Zen 2 Plus, Ryzen 4000 parts at some point, we would imagine this year. Nothing's been announced, but I would not be surprised if we had to wait just a little bit longer maybe this year. They really, really pushed things to get that July 7, that 7.7 release of Ryzen 3000 last year. And really, arguably, it was not ready. The platform was not ready yet. It had some growing pains. So I would either jump on whatever bargain you can find, because like Patrick said, things are not likely to get much cheaper this year. You may be waiting until the end of the year to get Ryzen 4000, or if it's even released by then. They have that. These products could have some longevity. I know there have been roadmaps out talking about when the next core is going to be ready and that sort of thing, but don't go crazy just yet. But at the same time, there are deals to be had, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
I think you said it well. I think you made your point, sir. And it's a good thing, making points. Oh, my goodness. Is there anything you can tease that's coming up on PC Per? Or are you under NDA and at gunpoint by Savage, fear of lawyers?
Well, just the excitement of retesting things, which I do periodically. I'm retesting graphics cards right now, and not because of some NDA product. We got another 5700 XT in to review, and what was interesting is it's from XFX. It's an announced product. It's the XFX Radeon RX 5600 XT Thick 3 Ultra. So, and it's one of the biggest graphics cards, at least longest graphics cards I've seen in a while. Actually, I have it right here. This thing is big. It did not fit in the case that I was originally going to throw it in for initial testing because it was too long. I had to move things around inside of the case. So, what's interesting about this card though is that even though I have the final release BIOS for this, and of course we've talked about this at length, AMD sent out that BIOS update for this graphics card, and these vendors had a choice. They could either up the memory speed from 12 gigabit per second to 14, or they could leave it alone and only overclock the core. And even on this high-end Ultra card, which retails for $329, they only have 12 gigabit per second memory. So they were either not confident that the memory could be sustainable at 14 over the life of the card, because it has a 5-year warranty, I believe. So, I mean, that's been a concern. MSI talked about this. We reported on that, I think, last week or the week before. So not every one of these cards is going to be the screamer that I tested initially, the Sapphire Pulse that AMD had sent that was overclocked to the max. So this will be a much more realistic look at, okay, here's what it actually performs like if you don't get one that can overclock the memory 100% of the time. So that is going to be interesting to me to see with, newer drivers, NVIDIA versus AMD, and really more AMD versus itself. How does this compare even to, say, the Vega 56, something you can find out there for really low prices, especially in the used market? Is this card even a worthy upgrade over that? And I think the answer might surprise you.
Is it?
I can't.
I guess we'll talk about that next week.
I can, but I will not say until next month.
That's the spirit. Well, there you have it, people. Stay tuned for graphics cards, updates, and so much more. Hey, it's time for Twit's annual audience survey. We want to hear from you. It only takes 5 minutes. It helps Twit determine who's out there so they can tell advertisers so they can get relevant advertising. And, of course, get the advertising that helps keep Sebastian and I showing up in your favorite podcatcher each and every week. Do us a favor. Visit twit.to/survey20. Let us know what you think. There's no sign-up form. We don't track you. And your feedback helps us make Twit even better. Thank you for your continued support. And if you're wondering what about this continued, I've never heard this podcast before, you're listening to This Week in Computer Hardware. We call it Twitch. You can find all the older episodes and information on how to subscribe at twit.tv/twitch or search for This Week in Computer Hardware on your favorite podcatcher. As I mentioned earlier, my name is Patrick Norton. I also do a podcast called AV Excel. And the man from Kalamazoo, not Ann Arbor, Sebastian Peak, is the editor-in-chief over at PC Per. And I suspect if you keep refreshing PC Per this week, you might find some fascinating graphics card news. He just told you about it. So keep it tuned, and please come back next week. It's all about just generating enthusiasm, Sebastian.
Right.
Looking forward to my improved Sprint coverage after the miracle merger. Yes, I am.
The miracle merger.
Oh, my goodness. Ladies and gentlemen, with that, I'm Patrick Norton.
And I'm Sebastian Peak.
We'll catch you next week on Twitch.